We all know the problem.
Yes.
Homeless is increasing. We're dumping money. It's not working. There's people doing drugs everywhere. They're stepping in their own poop. They're assaulting each other. Yeah, we get it. What's the solution? Just to let you know, because you should know.
Oh, and a little bit more.
And you
Okay, that's good.
You were on
Yeah.
Gallagher recently.
Yeah.
That's nice.
I went on it, but that guy's show. You know why? You know why I'm on there? I went to junior high with Tracy. I called him Tracy. He goes. I've been called Tracy for 40 years. I haven't seen you in 40 years. You're Tracy to me.
Trace.
It's hard to change that.
Yeah, like good. He's a good dude.
He is a nice guy.
He's a good
I
guy.
really like him.
Yeah, I like his show.
I remember he used to be, we went to school with him. And he was
Okay,
on
we're
the,
good.
He was on the surf team. So I always liked a guy who can surf. Ocean guy.
I imagine the guy on the surf team got all the girls.
Well, yeah. Got all the girls are at the beach. It's a lot of them.
Frank, we're here with Bill Wells,
Bill Wells, the mayor of El Cajon.
mayor of El Cajon.
How many people live in El Cajon?
100,000.
100,000?
Yeah, small by.
I thought there was more.
It's kind of small. Well, look, if you counted in the unincorporated areas of El Cajon that have an El Cajon address and people who think I'm their mayor,
Yeah.
about 300,000.
Right.
But the actual city limits of El Cajon,
Right. Okay, gotcha.
It's 100.
Wow. I go there. It just looks like more people are living there. But you don't have the buildings that downtown San Diego has. Do you have like one? I think it's your courtroom, Superior Court. That's a pretty good, like 8-story building, maybe 12.
I think it's 8.
Yeah, it sticks out really because it's a valley and it sticks out. And there's only one building.
It's a little weird. Yeah.
Are you gonna pop up some high rises in El Cajon? You gotta.
I think there are. I don't know if we're going to get to high rises, but I think we're going to have more 3-story buildings, maybe 4-story buildings, depending on where they're at. I don't ever see us having large high rises.
I know that El Cajon, there's only 100,000 in cities. San Diego's is probably 3.3 million, 3.2 million.
I think it's actually
Maybe less.
There's 3.5 million in the county.
3.5.
Yeah.
3.5 million in the county. And so I believe that San Diego is 1.3.
So let me ask you a tough question.
Well, I have a good question for Bill. I've been thinking about this all the time.
Go ahead.
You want to ask a question?
No.
No, you can ask
You're
it.
my big brother, man.
Frank, listen.
I already asked him a question.
This is a question. Bill, you run for public office. And last week or a week or so ago, we did a podcast on artificial intelligence and how we think that artificial intelligence can be used to manipulate an election. And I know there's a lot of people that don't want you to be mayor. There's a lot of people that want to vote somebody else to be mayor. However, the vast majority of people did vote for you, but you're going to have a lot of people who are going to come after you. So here's my question. Do you believe elections are being manipulated by either artificial intelligence, or do you believe elections can be manipulated through propaganda that's put in the newspaper or through different, through flyers that are sent to people that just paint a completely disproportionate picture of you?
Well, yeah, I believe that's been going on for as long as there's been elections. People try to manipulate whatever they can to try to get what they want. I don't think that's anything new. I think we have to be vigilant about making sure that doesn't happen. But, you talk about election manipulation. When Donald Trump came out and said the election was stolen and talked about the voting machines, that doesn't seem to have been proven at this point. But I could tell you one thing that's pretty obvious to me is that Facebook and Twitter were being manipulated by the federal government to change the way they dealt with the release of information on one side versus another. And I think that manipulated the election. So, yeah, I think propaganda is already playing a role, and the lack of freedom of speech is already playing a role. And we got to be vigilant about that.
But my question is, okay, we saw it at the federal level.
Oh, yeah.
But now with artificial intelligence, do you think that we're going to start to see elections being manipulated at the school board level, at the local level?
Well, I think so, because there was a time when people didn't really worry about what was happening in the smaller cities. They were all focused on the county and the city of San Diego. But I sit on the board of directors of Sandag, and Sandag is currently spending about $2 billion a year, but they want to get through raising money, $170 billion on a new project. And people like me are opposing that new project. And so they very much have a vested interest. And when I say they, I'm talking the unions and people that...
What is Sandag? People may not know what
sure.
Sandag is.
Sandag is the San Diego Association of Governments. Its charter was to deal with transportation issues so we could deal with a regional approach. And meaning we have 18 different municipalities in the county of San Diego. So if 18 different municipalities are dealing with the bus system and the trolley system on their own and making decisions based on that, you're going to have a hodgepodge of transportation systems. Basically, it's all going to fail. So the idea was to bring it all together, let everybody have a seat at the table, and then they could make regional decisions that would help everybody. And that worked out well on paper and actually worked out well in reality for quite a while. But over the past few years, Sandag has become controversial because they've become hyper-political. They've changed the voting rules. And so basically now only the city of San Diego and the county of San Diego have a say on what happens with all the money in Sandag. Any other vote from Poway, Escondido, El Cajon, Chula Vista, National City, all those votes can be overridden at any time by the groups.
Then why not just dissolve the whole thing?
Well, there's discussion about it. It's become so dysfunctional that nothing is getting done. Now I think it's become the most ridiculed and distrusted body in the history of San Diego politics. And I very much think that they're going to have difficulty talking to the citizens of San Diego County to give them nearly $200 billion to build a transportation system that nobody wants and nobody needs.
What kind of transportation? Buses, trolleys, subways? That stuff that Elon Musk is doing? He's digging underground, bore. So his idea is to have tunnels.
Yeah, I saw this.
It would kind of make sense.
Pretty interesting.
Because why not go
I like
underground?
the engineering. He was describing the engineering, saying a tunnel is much more safe during an earthquake than the roads are above.
Why?
Well, because you make one tunnel, and then you put some material around that, and then you make another tunnel. So the actual road can move with the earth and doesn't snap, doesn't break. So it's almost like it's riding independently.
That makes sense.
Yeah, from the earth. That's how he explained it. I'm probably not explaining it right, but
no, that makes sense.
Well, I tell you, I have a much more old-fashioned pedestrian idea about this. I think you accept the fact that San Diego was built as an automobile town in California, which is an automobile state. California was the first state that was really built around the concept of an automobile. So it's kind of hard to go back and turn it into something else now. I believe that most of this global warming talk is hysteria and that it's kind of become a religion. And so people are willing to destroy their own economies and destroy their own lives in the name of it. But I think from a more pragmatic effect is cars are getting cleaner all the time. We're probably going to see autonomous cars not too long in the future. At that point, everything changes. If you have autonomous cars, you and I don't own cars. We get on our cell phone, we say, I need a car outside of my house in 6 minutes. And you walk out and there it is. You get in it, it takes you where you want to go, you jump out, and you move on to what you're doing next. And they're going everywhere. They're using the freeway system, but they're traveling at 80, 90, 100 miles an hour. They're traveling 3 inches from each other because they're not going to
hit each other.
It changes everything. And of course, the carbon footprint is going to go down, down, down as we get into hydrogen cars and all these other technologies. The technology is going to figure out this problem. So dismantling the system and forcing people out of their cars, which seems to be the focus right now, and forcing them onto these trolleys and bus lines, which don't seem to have the capacity to fit into a California, San Diego kind of lifestyle. and doing it blindly and saying, well, it doesn't matter how inconvenient, it doesn't matter how inexpensive, it doesn't matter how much everybody hates it, we have to do this to save the planet. I have real problems with that.
Frank,
Yeah.
so I did some research. There's 8 billion people on the planet now.
Okay.
I think in 1300, there were 380,000 people, some crazy number like that. And now we're at 8 billion.
Okay.
So of the 8 billion people, the United States makes up 4.5% of the 8 billion.
Yeah.
So of the 8 billion people, 3 billion every day burn either wood or animal dung.
You are absolutely right.
To stay warm and to cook.
To stay alive.
So how is it that if we're not driving an extra 10 miles is going to have any impact
Offset
if
from
we
all the
can't
other
get all
countries.
these other people? Like, what are we going to go to another country and say, you got to stop burning wood? Because
Well, here's what America always does, I think. They feel bad about drilling. They feel bad about making chrome parts, these chemicals. So they buy it from other countries that completely do it the wrong way, is contaminating the world. But we just let someone else do it. You drill in your land and pull out the oil. We'll buy it from you. But isn't that hypocrisy? Like,
what
right?
do you think?
If someone's going to drill, and if it's global, why don't we drill?
Well,
Why are you making them drill?
I got a couple things to say.
It's a
about-
bigger question.
I mean,
I
this,
hear what Bill has to say.
this is exciting because I think about these things all the
Yeah.
time. First off, you are exactly right. The most of the world is impoverished, and they are living on a few dollars a day, and they're burning dung, they're burning wood, they're burning coal. If you want to help global warming, lift as many people out of poverty as you possibly can. The way you lift them out of poverty is giving them cheap, clean energy. Now, we have that available to us. That's in the form of natural gas. In fact, America could get rid of its entire national debt and solve all its problem by selling the world our natural gas.
That's right.
Now, that would also reduce carbon emissions in these countries like India and Indonesia and China by 98%, and everybody would be happy. They would be lifted out of poverty. They would stop dying of cold and exposure. We could get rid of our
Debt.
financial problems.
Right.
And the carbon footprint around the world would go down, and everybody should be happy. But for some reason, we've demonized natural gas, and so nobody will even discuss it. And it's just nonsensical.
Well,
and it tells me that they don't really want to solve the problem, that the problem has nothing to do with global warming. It has to do with control and wanting to degrade the quality of life in the West so that we can have some kind of a parity throughout the rest of the world.
Yeah.
We can all be poor, which doesn't make a lot of sense to
Which
me.
is a good segue.
So, but before, I wanted to touch upon
another
that.
one.
Frank, listen. There are in San Francisco, they're banning natural gas. They don't want you to have gas pumped into your new homes. They want you to be all electric. And there was even a push to get rid of gas stoves.
Yep.
And there's a push in New York to stop these guys from making wood-fired pizzas because they go, your little wood-fired pizza is polluting it, so
killing it.
you need...
This is the hypocrisy. There's a guy who went to the Congo to find out where he gets cobalt to put in the batteries
Yeah.
of these electric cars of our cell phones. He found out a massive slavery
I
going
saw
on,
that.
kid slavery. And
Sure.
They're all digging
Joe
with
Rogan,
picks. They're
had good.
they
good
had these.
podcast.
They had their.
Well, they're hitting it with rocks.
They have sandals on, and their feet are
Right.
getting. They're little
People
kids.
are dying, whatever. So that whole mess to get this cobalt to charge these electric cars, it shows hypocrisy on we want to do what's best for the globe.
Yeah.
When they always end up ignoring what's really going on.
Yeah, I thought slavery was a big problem.
Yeah.
Slavery,
I thought we
You think?
decided we don't
let's
like
talk
slavery.
about. Yeah, I thought we don't like slavery. However, at our border, we're from San Diego. There's slavery right now, and it's child slavery.
Yeah,
it's
sex
human
slavery.
slavery. It's sex slavery.
It's indentured
And
servitude.
It's on video. It's not like people are talking about it anymore. They have it. A line of kids going to nowhere. The coyotes taking them to the border and then selling them off. Coyotes are the people that bring other humans to the border. They call them coyotes. That's a segue into our way of life is looking so bad that our homeless crisis is right in front of our face, and we're literally stepping over
Unbelievable.
other humans to get to work. And we're looking at more and more homeless, and we're kind of getting used to it, and people are not reacting.
Well, I'm not used to it. I think
What
it's
is going on?
disgusting. I think it's a disgrace, and it's a mark on our country.
And it could be fixed.
You can't look. In LA, there's 70,000 homeless. San Diego, we're hovering around 12, 15,000.
I think more like
20, 30? Okay, let's just say we have 100,000 people. We can't solve it? 100,000?
We can solve it.
So what's the solution,
So I'm gonna ask
Mr.
Bill,
Wells?
because
Yeah.
Mr. Wells, yeah. I know that you are a doctor in psychology. I know that you worked in an ER room in hospitals. I know that you evaluated people coming in, and about 1/3 of your clients were homeless. So people are trying to demonize you the way you're approaching this homeless issue, but you're doing it. And I don't want to bring this up, but you can also talk about your background, your father's addiction, and how that changed your way, so people get to know the Bill Wells that I know.
Well, I could certainly talk about the addiction problems in my family, and it's been great. I've had a lot of addiction problems in my family, a lot of suicide problems as a result of that. But I don't think I'm that unique. I'm guessing that I don't know either of you guys well enough to know the things that you've got in your past or with family members or friends. Right. But if you're like any other American, you probably have a brother, a sister, a father, a mother, an aunt, an uncle, a best friend,
right.
Somebody who was addicted to the point where it touched your life and you really, in some ways, probably damaged you.
Right.
And you certainly saw that destroy them. So addiction is a problem I think we can all relate to. And so that's why I got involved in mental health. It really touched me as a young kid. I made a decision very early on not to get involved with that. Ended up working in mental health and doing psychiatric evaluations in an emergency room for a long time. As a result of that, I ended up seeing a lot of homeless people come through the process. And I was naive when I started, and I would meet people and I would say, hey, let me help you. Let me get you off the street. Like, I can get you a bed. I'll make some phone calls. We'll get you. They'd say, no, thanks. Every single one of them. And I talked to one of the older ER docs. He said, you're wasting your time, man. They don't want help. And I thought, well, that can't be true. That's way too jaded. Eventually I came to the same conclusion.
That they don't want help? Or they don't know that they want help? Or they're so
Both.
screwed up that they're like, I don't give a shit anymore.
Both. See, the truth is that there's lots of opportunities to get off the street, and that's an anathema to many people. I'll get so many angry emails for saying that. They'll say, "How can you say that?" It's just the truth. We have the East Canada Transitional Living Center in El Cajon, which is a great program. Last I checked, it had over 40 open beds, and we've got 500 people on the streets in El Cajon who are not using any of those beds. Now, it doesn't take a genius to figure out they could go to those beds, but they don't want to. And it's not like they don't know, because our police officers approach them over 12, 15 times.
Right.
Each single one of them say, hey, please get off the street. Let me help you. But the problem is, and this is what I found in the emergency rooms, I would say, hey, let me help you get off the street. And they say, I don't want to do it. I said, why not? They said, because frankly, I can't use meth in that program. Right. I can't drink. I can't bring my girlfriend with me. I can't bring my pit bull with me. They're all the reasons they had, but the truth is they had formed a community where they could do drugs with impunity and they could live how they wanted. They didn't have to pay any bills. They didn't have to go to work. And it worked for them. It's really hard for people to understand, because most of us wouldn't want to live that. Most of it, I need to have my cup of coffee and my shower in the morning, and I need that so bad that I'm willing to go and
not
work,
do drugs.
work all the time, so that I can have a nice car and a nice home, and
Right.
my wife is happy, and that's important to me. But there's a lot of people that see that's a sucker's way to go,
Right.
and then when you get super addicted, and we've all seen this with somebody in our lives that's super addicted, at some point they lose ambition to do anything else besides seek out more drugs.
Right.
So if the government will give you $1,500, $2,000 a month, plus food stamps, plus free health care, plus a free cell phone, and you can live on the streets, you can steal up to $950 a day without being arrested. You've got a whole little ecosystem there to keep you, to sustain you so that you can do drugs 24 hours a day. And if the cost of that is you get wet and cold and assaulted occasionally and raped occasionally, it defies logic, but there are some people that say that's a good trade-off.
Remember the show Fantasy Island
Yeah, the plane.
with Tattoo?
Of course.
The plane. Maybe they need...
Was he homeless?
No. No. But he was on an island.
Right.
So what if there was an island that, like, let's just take Catalina. I'm just going to use that. I wouldn't use it, but...
I like Catalina. Let's not.
Yeah,
Let's not
okay, let's
How
use
about
it different.
Fiesta Island?
Fiesta. Yeah.
No one cares
Fiesta
about
Island, yeah.
Fiesta Island.
But let's just
Except
say there was
over-the-line
there was
players.
an area
Right.
that we said, you know what?
Camp out.
You guys can do whatever the hell you want, but you got to stay on this island. And if you want to do drugs, whatever the hell you want to do,
Yeah, you know what that's
can do
called?
it.
Fantasy Island,
called-
Mark.
it's
Because
called-
it's not going to happen.
No,
What are you going to do if they leave
but
the
what
island?
I'm saying, what Bill is saying is that there is no solution.
Oh, no.
No, he's not saying
I
that.
absolutely think there's a solution.
So
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
okay.
If-
So let's hear.
If
You
you,
got to
made,
let the man talk.
if you
Okay.
made me king,
All right, you're the king.
Oh, wait a second for our viewers. We're about to hear one of the... We all know the problem.
Yes.
Homeless is increasing. We're dumping money. It's not working. There's people doing drugs everywhere. They're stepping in their own poop. They're assaulting each other. Yeah, we get it. What's the solution?
but I got to give a little background.
Okay.
So we spent $25 billion in the last 5 years on homelessness in California. We have 171,000 homeless people on the streets of California. A lot of that has to do with the laws that we've made. We've really encouraged homelessness. We've made lawlessness possible. And the state legislature has done everything they can to make it viable to be a homeless person in California. Some people say that's just because they're stupid. I don't think that's true. I think it's a conspiracy. And I think that conspiracy, like most conspiracies, revolve around money.
Money.
$25 billion is a bunch of change. You look at San Diego County. San Diego County last year got $2.7 billion to treat homelessness. My city in El Cajon, how much do you think we got to treat homelessness?
Couple million.
Zero. No cities get any money besides maybe San Diego. The money is all spent through these NGOs, these non-governmental organizations. So we've got 65 NGOs in El Cajon that are doing business, working with the homeless population. Now, each one of those has a tremendous amount of money that goes into that. They have high salaries for all their CEOs and their administrative staff. And by the time San Diego County takes their cut and the NGOs take their cut, there's not that much money left for homelessness. Besides, the state of California has made it a law that you can't do anything with homeless money other than provide housing. So, and what I mean by that is that, say, a good program like the San Diego Rescue Mission will get $0 from the government because they require sobriety.
Right.
But that's not what the state of California wants. The state of California wants
It's housing first.
It's
That is-
housing
that
first.
initiative.
Legislatures
Yeah,
say,
it
no,
doesn't-
we don't care if they're on
fail.
drugs. That's their problem.
So since we've been putting money into this housing first problem, we've seen 35% more housing units come on the market for homeless people, which is a nice thing. But we've seen 48% more people on the streets. So we have to admit that this problem doesn't work. So that's the first step towards solving homelessness. Admit that housing first is a failure. Second step is to admit what the root problem really is. The root problem is not a lack of income. It's not a lack of jobs. It's not a lack of affordable housing. It is addiction. And again, I ask you to ask everybody in this podcast knows a cop or a firefighter or a paramedic or a nurse. Ask them. They will tell you. Don't take my word for it.
Right.
But let's assume I'm right. So the biggest problem is addiction. So now we know that housing first doesn't work and addiction is the big problem. Now we say, well, how do we solve the problem? First off, we need a lot of money to solve the problem. And that's not a problem because we're already spending billions and billions of dollars, $25 billion in the last few years. So we take some of that money and we open up state hospitals again. And we've closed 2 prisons. We open those 2 prisons back up. Then we get the legislature to accept what the problem is and revamp the laws so that when you are not making a good decision on the streets, and you are unwilling to help yourself, even though you obviously are destroying yourself, at some point we have the ability to say, okay, it's no longer up to you anymore. We're going to make the decision for you. We're going to put you in a treatment program, a locked treatment program where you go for quite a while. If you fail out of that, then unfortunately you're going to have to go to incarceration in a prison.
But don't we? Didn't Newsom? I know you didn't. I'm not. How do I say this? I don't agree with a lot of things Newsom does, but he did do this thing called care court, and I agreed with that. I said that was something where he was going to allow the relatives of a homeless person have some type of power of attorney to actually. Is that about it?
No, basically the care court idea, which by the way, I was the first mayor in California to sign up with care court. I wrote him a letter and affirmed him. And I'm not the biggest Newsom fan, but when he does the right thing, I'm going to tell him he did the right thing.
Right.
Unfortunately, the legislature got involved, and all the hardcore leftists got involved, and they watered it down to the point where again it's worthless. Unfortunately. But the idea of it was good. The idea of it was revamping the laws and making it so that you had that police and fire and hospitals and doctors had the ability to make an executive decision and say, you can't stay on the streets anymore. We're gonna put you into a locked facility. The problem is we don't have the facilities. So we have 3.5 million people in San Diego County, right?
No.
Statistically, 1 in 100 people have schizophrenia. Now, schizophrenia is a brain disorder that is so bad that you can't work, you can't get married, you can't drive a car, you're just basically unable to function without somebody taking care of you. So statistically, we have 35,000 people like that in San Diego County. We have one county hospital that has 100 beds. So we got 35,000 schizophrenics, got 40 or 50,000 bipolar folks, maybe 1.5 million people with drug addiction problems, maybe the same number of people, some of them crossing over that have suicidality with depression problems, severe anxiety problems, and personality disorders. And we have 100 beds, and we have a couple hundred locked beds. It's woefully inadequate. It would be like we have one auto mechanic for the entire county of San Diego. Right. All the cars have to be fixed. Right. So we've got to have the political will to take a look at this and say, wait a second, let's throw all the political rhetoric away. Let's step outside of the partisan bickering. Let's really try to help people, and let's admit that there's a problem. Let's provide solutions for that problem. Spend whatever it takes to spend, and then give the teeth to the people that make the decisions, give them enough power to force people off the streets when they have to. And then it wouldn't be over, but you could drive down your street. It could be like when you and I were kids in the 70s and 80s. We drive to the store and basically wouldn't have to step over homeless people to go to CVS.
Okay, so here's
and you can leave your door unlocked.
So Bill, here's a situation that goes back to education that I believe is important. Because for the last decade or so, there's been this big push in public education for students to enter something called STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. Then they added the arts to it. So now it's STEAM because the arts had to get in there at some point.
Got to get the A.
We got to get the.
I got to tell you, I'm having went to Mount Carmel High School and been very involved in the music. The arts helped my life a lot. So
no, absolutely.
He's happy they got the A in there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the actual drive was not for arts. The actual drive was to put people in these science and math, these high-paying jobs, and an active recruitment for minorities and females to go into the STEM field. And the government puts literally billions of dollars in to promote this. But this was at the detriment of the social sciences. So many students didn't take that track to go into counseling or psychology or any type of therapeutic kind of a job. So what we've seen is a depletion of the qualified counselors and mental health care providers.
social services.
So when you said like, okay, we have one mechanic to handle all the cars.
Yeah, you have one
We want to
social
hire
worker
another
with
mechanic, but there are no other mechanics. Like,
Right.
where am I going to get these mechanics? So I believe that there has to be a push now to put these kids into this mental health profession, and they have to pay them appropriately, because the reason why they didn't go in there, I mean, try and find a counselor. Even with the best insurance, you can't get a mental health service provider.
That's my business. I own a company that provides psychiatric and psychological counseling services for federally qualified health clinics. So,
Do you recruit them?
oh yeah, I've got many people that work for us. But I'm going to give you a different take on this. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
I let my psychology license go. My wife let her psychology license go because we could not comply with the state's regulations on what we could say and what we could believe and be a therapist in California anymore. And therapists are fleeing from California.
Right.
Because if somebody comes to you, if a kid comes to you and says, hey, I'm a girl, I think I'm a boy, the appropriate psychological response should be, well, it sounds like you've got some issues, and let's talk about that. Let's figure out what's going on. I want to help you. And she says, great, can you get me signed up for surgery or get me signed up for a medication? Now you're supposed to say, absolutely, let's do that right away.
Right.
But any of us who've been around and doing this for a while know that this is a social contagion.
Right.
And what you have to do is say, no, you know what? Let's just go through the therapeutic process. You'll be 18 eventually, and you can make your own decision at that point. But we're not going to jump to this conclusion, because there could be a lot of things that are involved in this decision that you're making, and that you may regret it if you take some kind of drastic action.
Because
at
it's
this
irreversible.
point.
It's irreversible.
And that's not the only issue, but politics seeped deeply into the therapeutic process. So I'm not a licensed psychologist anymore. I got rid of my license. I still have an RN license, a registered nurse license. But my wife stopped doing therapy for money and started doing it for free at the church, because she couldn't be held to that standard, not just with the transgenders, but many psychological issues. So if you want to encourage people to go into that kind of profession, you're right about one thing. You have to be able to pay them a decent wage. They have to be able to have a living wage. But you also have to let the government get off their back and let them practice their science and their art the way they do it. And there should be standards. I certainly think that you always have to watch the people that are doing this, because they have a tremendous amount of power over their patients. And so, there's always therapists that let their own personal desires and proclivities get in the way of doing a good job. Not many, but there's always a few. So you have to have a licensing structure, but it shouldn't be political.
Right.
Frank, Bill, what always seems to come back and be mentioned? The number one culprit
Drugs.
in all of this crap that's going on is the government. Every time we turn around, it's the government. It's whether it's
Even when you said you had a homeless solution, part of your solution mentioned the political will. So you don't have a solution because there's no political will. So then you have to how do you solve that solution so you can get to the homeless solution when the political will is so divided now that
it's not going to let you.
it's not going to let
Yeah.
you. So you can never have a solution unless the political will
Because they would
changes.
rather have the people on the streets and make all that money.
And that's what
Just follow
that's
the
what
money.
people are doing. They're not really following the money. When you follow the money, it ends up being towards a party they may have loved.
There's also the political
And now they're
ideology.
realizing they're getting duped.
And don't you think there's also the political ideology problem? You know, the way I look at serving in government is that I'm a servant, not somebody who's in charge of everybody.
Right.
And so as a servant, I come to you and say, what are your needs? How can I help you? How can I make your life better? And that's how I look at how I approach being the mayor. And I think that a lot of politicians in California have lost that concept. They've switched over now to saying, we are in charge of everything. We're the supreme rulers, and you are too stupid to know what you really need. And so we're going to force this upon you.
Right.
And you're going to comply, and eventually you'll thank us.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the entirely wrong approach. We should be crafting a society where we provide safety and we provide opportunity for people, and we stay out of the way and we let people kind of decide for themselves. So if you want to go to if you're the father of this girl that I talked about who thinks, she's 13 and she thinks maybe she wants to transgender into being transition into being a boy, you can come and see me as a therapist, and I'll say, yeah, I think that's a bad idea. And you can see him as the therapist and say, no,
great idea.
It's a great idea. And you can choose.
Right.
Because that's the way
you're the
world
parent.
works. But the government doesn't step in and say, your particular ideologies are toxic and you're cut out of the equation, and giving people no choice. We had a discussion earlier about the free market and about how capitalism generally corrects itself, even though oftentimes it goes through these periods of time where it seems very unfair and people are getting hurt. The general way of things is it corrects itself. And I think democracy is also like that. I think democracy, if you give people space and let them live and have some breathing room, they'll generally come to the right conclusion.
So you mentioned something here, and you've talked about it before. You used the term a social contagion.
Yeah.
Can you talk about various
Examples
throughout history? Because I think that would put this in a pretty decent context.
Yeah. So when I first started in psychiatric work in 1988. And that was at the height of the bulimia anorexia crisis. I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah,
of course.
Yeah, we're older,
but
we get it.
Yeah. So for those of you who are younger, there was a period of time in the mid '80s where a new thing came on the horizon, which was bulimia and anorexia. And anorexia is basically you didn't want to eat anymore because you felt that you were too fat, you were overweight. And then anorexia was really made popular by Princess Di, who would deal with her anorexia by binging and then vomiting up all that food.
Right.
And so everybody heard about that, and it was on Oprah, and it was on every news channel, it was on every magazine cover. It just became this big thing. So an interesting thing happened. What was a very, very remote problem that happened in maybe 1/10 of 1% of the people that you would see in clinical practice, suddenly became 40 and 50% of the people in a certain age group. And young women from around the world, we saw 10,000% increase in people saying that they were anorexic and bulimic. Of course, the market said, hey, there's money to be made here. And so when I was getting into psych, there were major anorexia and bulimia hospitals in every market. So San Diego, I think they had the Rader Institute. They had maybe 3 different big places where you could go and get treatment for anorexia. I was going to school and working in Dallas at the time. I actually worked on an anorexic bulimic unit. And what happened is it became very fashionable, and these young girls who were unhappy by nature, because teenage girls are often a little bit.
I have 2 daughters.
They're unhappy.
They go through cycles.
Yeah.
Unhappy, happy, unhappy, happy.
They were looking for answers, and they saw on TV, this is the answer to my problem. And not only will I be able to put my focus on a problem other than just the fact that I'm having trouble adjusting. I don't feel pretty enough. I don't feel popular enough. I don't feel smart enough. Instead of dealing with those complex issues, you say, oh, I have this disease, and that's the reason for all my problems. And so people latched onto this. But there's a difference. When I was being trained, the older, more experienced people would say, don't give in to this. Don't tell them that what they're doing is a good thing. Be supportive, be loving. But, if they say, don't you think I'm too fat? You say, no. You weigh about 90 pounds. That's actually very thin, and it's not healthy.
Yeah.
And, and that was the way we approached it. Recently, we've seen something similar with the transgender issue. If you look at the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistics Manual, which is the book that we use to diagnose all the people with psychiatric disorders, gender dysphoria was a real thing, and always has been a real thing, but a little different than it looks today. It used to be that 90% of the people with gender dysphoria were boys that had feminine characteristics. And this usually started coming out in preschool. So you would see very young boys, 4, 5, 6 years old, that really identified with their female characteristics. They wanted to dress in women's clothes. They wanted to play with girls. They wanted to play with Barbies. They felt like girls.
That's bad.
And
That's a good strategy for a boy.
but it's
Exactly.
Get in early.
Yeah.
Figure
the
it out.
girls.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
I love Barbies, man.
Yeah, no problem.
All right,
Let's put some makeup on.
we could talk about predatory behavior later.
Okay.
All right. So but what we found is that generally, most of these boys, about 95%, kind of grew out of the problem. Many of them later identified as being gay. Almost never saw it with girls. And then about 5 years ago, there was this new phenomenon, and teenage girls. Now, what's interesting is teenage. So we never used to see it in teenagers before. We would see it in young children. So now it's with teenagers. That, interestingly enough, most of these teenagers were part of a social network where several of the girls were deciding that they had the transition from one gender to the other. They almost all were inundated with social media where they were being encouraged to do this. We saw a 100% increase in 2 years of teenage girls that were coming and asking for gender reassignment surgery and or medication. Now, normally, the right thing to do from a clinical standpoint is to say, okay, you're having issues. Let's talk about it. Let's look into why you're feeling this way. Let's talk about what are some of the social pressures that you're dealing with. Mm-hmm. And let's kind of drill down on what the real problem is and maybe what the real solution is. And maybe the real solution is not having surgery or taking hormones that are going to alter your life. And worst case scenario, you still feel this way in 7 years and you're an adult and you can do what you want. But knowing that almost all these cases would resolve themselves and girls would find a way to be happy without latching on to this. But what's happened is we have let the patient dictate the treatment.
Right.
So the patient comes in and therapists are told, you have no choice.
Why go to therapy?
What do you mean you have no choice?
Gender affirming care.
So you have to prescribe them
Yeah, you have to give them what they want.
hormones?
Whatever they need.
As a therapist, you are compelled to say, yes, this is a viable thing. It's a legitimate thing, and I'm going to refer you to the right
Who's
doctor.
writing this? Who's the person that the?
I don't know, but let's get back to one thing.
But hold
that
on
you
a second.
said.
Who's the czar that says you have to say this?
This is
Legislatures.
accepted clinical behavior. If you don't want to be fired from your hospital, if you don't want to be run out of your university,
Blackballed.
Great example. I can't remember her name, but there was a very esteemed researcher who started looking into this, and she's a lefty. She's not a Republican,
Right.
but she started realizing she saw the spikes,
Right.
and as a as a researcher says, "Oh, that's not right. That doesn't happen. You don't see fluctuations of 5,000%. You see fluctuations of a quarter of a quarter of a percent." And so she started writing about this and say, "Hey, this is a problem. We've got a problem." And she was completely blackballed. She was kicked off all the publications that she wrote for. She was kicked out of her university. She lost her job. Her husband lost his job.
So they're vindictive.
And now she's working on the Trump campaign.
So here's this.
Wait, hold on a second. Can I just make one point?
Absolutely.
Because it came back to what you said. So theoretically, if you have this group of girls that are talking to other groups of girls or boys, and they start all doing the same thing, it'd be like a virus that's contagious.
Right.
So that's where you get the word social contagion.
Exactly right.
That's what it means.
So there was
I know you knew
there
that,
was
but maybe
there
someone
was
out there
there was another one. Remember the movie Sybil, where she had multiple personalities.
Perfect example. So multiple personality disorder. Most psychiatrists, I've never met a psychiatrist that believed in it. In almost 40 years of clinical practice, I've never seen anybody. I've seen hundreds of people that said they had it.
It was a good movie.
And it's a constructed issue. It's still contested. There's still some people who say, "Oh no, there's all these studies." The truth is, it's not accepted, and if it happens, it's so incredibly rare. But it became again a social contagion, and I started seeing a lot of. You know what another social contagion was? False memory syndrome.
I don't remember that.
Yeah, what are you talking about?
So the McMartin preschool.
That never happened.
Oh, I remember the McMartin preschool. Yeah.
That was an example of it. The therapists that debriefed these kids, they thought that there was somebody molesting the kids in the school. The therapists that were debriefing the kids all basically planted these memories in these kids, maybe with good intentions, but they said, "Didn't he touch you there? Come on."
Right. Leading questions. They wouldn't
then, the 3-year-old's like, "I guess so."
Okay. Sure.
How do they know?
And then after a while, the 3-year-old, this has happened to me. I'm sure it's happened to everybody. Haven't you ever had a memory that at some point you think, did that really happen?
Would that really happen, or was that a dream or a memory? What was
or was that something like a story that I used to tell that
became true? Said enough times.
So one of the ways that I saw it was really interesting because I was in the epicenter of it. I was in Dallas. And in Dallas, they had this therapist, and he actually worked at my hospital that I worked. He got thrown out. He lost his privileges, but he had a client that was suicidal and having all these problems, a teenage girl, and he started talking to her, and he came out and said she was satanically abused by her family. Her family that said they were good, Baptists, were really Satanists, and they would get her pregnant, and then they would abort the baby, and then they would eat the fetus in a satanic ritual, and they would sew her inside the skin of a gutted horse, and just like these crazy things. And so this first girl came out and started saying these things, and I remember we all said, "Oh my God, you poor thing. It's awful." But then he admitted another girl in the hospital, the same story. I'm like, that's crazy. That happened twice. And then, he had 6 girls on the unit. They were all telling the same story. And their parents would come in. And I was just a kid back then. I was in my 20s. And, I would talk to the parents. They would say, "We don't know what's happening."
Right. Yeah.
We're regular people. Right. I swear to you, I swear to God, we didn't do any of these things.
Right.
And eventually, the Dallas Morning News picked it up, and they figured it out, and they found that he had been thrown out of a bunch of other hospitals, and this is a pattern.
So it's a whack job.
He would tell these girls, the reason you're unhappy is because your dad's a Satanist, and he would rape you and do these things to you.
And they believed it.
He
said
he carefully implanted these. So that was another social contagion, and
wow,
it's
scary.
Like Total Recall, where they implant things in your brain, like a memory of a trip or something.
Yeah.
You remember that? That's what they did.
Yeah,
We're going to stick a memory in your mind, and
Right,
you're going to
because
think
anything-
it's real.
Right. Anything you do is a memory. You go on a vacation.
But
it's a
you know what I
memory.
noticed? That when you're talking about these social contagions, whether it's anorexia or multiple personality disorder or this one where, the satanic one, that with the advent of the internet, they can communicate these things because they do it all on
Absolutely.
TikTok and all this stuff. And they,
Right. So it's,
and you-
it's
they-
like a virus that goes pandemic.
and they
'Cause you
make
have-
it
you
a,
have global now.
like it's a cool thing. Like, remember that,
Everything they do
remember the
dances.
Budweiser commercial where they thought this was going to be cool because we're in this thing, and the Bud people just go, "No, sorry, we're not gonna do that. We don't want that. We don't want that as our representation of who we are." So I think there's some pushback on it now.
Well, so like I've beat up on the left a lot, but let's look at the right. I mean, this whole QAnon thing that happened,
Oh,
and the
people are still believing in that.
the reason that happened was because people were frightened, and they were looking for answers, and they self-directed to these websites that gave them these really titillating responses, and then they just got wrapped up in an algorithm where that's all they saw.
Right.
Every day, all day, every day, they're like, "Oh, look at this! Oh, the King of England is actually working with the King of Norway to take away our rights," and it got crazy.
Algorithms. You said they're feeding you what they think you want to. They just keep
if you-
piling it on.
My wife likes dogs. I do too, but I don't get into social media. But she watches these reels, and she likes to watch reels about cute dogs. And
Every reel there's a cute dog.
she doesn't even have to look for them anymore.
Right,
Every time she wakes up in the morning, there's like 85
Right.
reels about these dogs that are doing cute
I
things.
bet you our phone's going to pick this up now. I'm going to get reels about dogs.
Maybe.
Because if I ever mention anything, like, hey, I saw these really cool pair of Hoka shoes, all of a sudden, I'm getting these.
Right.
Those are cool shoes.
I know, I'm wearing them now. I mean, they're
I had
the best.
a,
They are good.
I talked about my knee hurting once, and the next day I had a knee brace that popped up on my
So
phone. I'm
what's
like,
in
"Oh,
the
that's what I
phone
want."
that's monitoring our conversations? But I'm that guy who has, like, I have Alexa in my house, and I'm just.
No, I'm done.
I don't have any.
I like it.
I don't
because
think
it
I have anything
helps
that
me shut
important
up.
that anybody even want to listen to.
I did too.
It's like.
But I read a book called "Live Not by Lies." It talked about the history of totalitarianism and how the totalitarians get to you. And there's a whole section on surveillance. And I thought, oh, I'm done. I got rid of all my Alexa stuff.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
What about your TVs? Flat screen TVs? You don't think they're bugging you?
Oh, probably.
I heard there's a camera in the TVs.
I mean, at some point you could,
Right?
I just gave up.
I don't want to be one of those guys who's like pulling teeth out of their head because
Right.
Yeah,
There's a
I'm just
microphone in there.
just boring. Like I don't ever say that much.
But if it was true that everyone's listening to us and copying what you're saying and doing something about it, then how do you have like mass shootings or anything big happen all the time? They could have stopped it.
good point. I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah. So
That is a good point.
I don't think that they're maybe
there's
to
so many
some-
things that go wrong. You go like they just found the lab in L.A.
Yeah,
and they said some guy walked by and there's a hose coming out.
yeah, I saw that.
And then they went in there and found out there was a biological things going on with a Chinese company, and they found
Yeah.
a bunch of dead rats, and they're dealing with bloodborne pathogens.
right, a lot
And
of
that's
them.
been there for a long time.
Yeah, that's the
How
one.
does
They
the government not know about that?
well, that's just the one they found.
Yeah, but I don't think I don't think the government's that
So here's the
sharp.
that good.
Yeah,
The twist on what you said, though, is a lot of people say, well, I don't worry about surveillance because the same thing as you said. The problem with surveillance is not that they're listening to everybody. The problem with surveillance is they decide they don't like you.
No, once you're tagged, you're done. Correct.
And then they go back and look at everything you said over the last
Everything.
year, and they say,
Right.
and it's like the secret police leader for Russia, for the USSR. I can't remember the guy's name, but he said, "Show me the man, I'll show you his crime," which I think is a lot what Trump is dealing with right now.
Right.
It's like I think a lot of the reason people are so upset about what's happening with Trump right now is not because he committed a crime and got caught, but because it's pretty obvious that the government looked for a crime. They got a bunch of people together and look through every document they possibly could and say, here's something we can get them
Right.
on, which is not the way that the government should be dealing with us.
Correct. Not a free government,
Right.
but they do.
Have you
And
heard of
they're
these
doing it.
Chinese credits?
Credit score? Yeah.
Yeah.
Where if you have a low score, you may not be able to buy gas or you're rationed on something.
Yeah, but what's that different about what we do here? It's taking it to another level. But if you want a loan and you have a bad credit score, you're not going to get a good loan with a good percentage.
No.
So they judge you already on credit.
No, because that's getting. I mean,
But
they're talking about.
we're talking about
things you have to live with. Like,
Me doing this podcast, if we had a social credit score, me doing this podcast would take my social credit score down to the point where I would not be able to go to certain restaurants, and I would not be able to buy certain goods,
Right.
and I would not be able to hold certain jobs or have certain clearances. So when you called me up and said you want to do my podcast, I was like, yeah, it's not worth it to me, man.
Right.
It's
So here's what I say about that. You being on this podcast is going to elevate you to a super high level and make you get what you really want because you're on part of the program. And
well, I think
I agree with you.
I can say
That's
I
the way
can
to live.
say
the other
that
way.
the things that you share, that you're sharing now, they're not like crazy, like conspiracy theory things. They're based upon research, based upon history, based upon what we know that has happened in the past and how these social contagions have gone through. And I suspect at some point we'll look back in 20 years from now and go, remember when everybody was wanting to...
let's show Bill Wells on our interview. He called it 20 years ago.
But who knows?
Like,
What's the next one going to be?
Can I say one thing about the homeless? Because I know
Oh, sure.
that you're dealing a lot with the homeless, getting a lot of media for the homeless issues. I want to tell you what I think a homeless person is and tell me if you think I'm correct.
Okay.
Because we're talking about a housing crisis, right? We have a housing shortage, and that's why a lot of these people are on the street. We have to build more houses for these homeless people.
I disagree
But
with that, but go ahead.
Okay, I do too. So here's what I'm going to say. All these people that are homeless now were not homeless a while ago. They lived in a house, and they probably lived with their family. And they started to take drugs, and the drugs started affecting the family. They started stealing from their mom's purse. They started living weird. The parents go, "Hey man, you can't live like this. Tough love. If you don't follow our rules, you have to move out." So then they go to a friend's house. They go on their sofa, and within a short amount of time, the drug addiction starts to go, and they get kicked out of that house. And then they go in someone's garage. Man, you can sleep in my garage for shelter. And then a bunch of stuff is going on in that guy's garage. He goes, "You can't do this if you want to live here." And then they go on the street. So all these people that are looking for housing have housing. As long as they change their attitude and their addiction, they can go back to the housing they originated from, especially if there's a study that says 85%, I don't agree with this, but there's a study that says about 85% of the homeless people in San Diego are from San Diego. So if that's the case, there is housing for them to live in. It's called their parents' house. Where they got kicked out of, they can still go back if they clean themselves. So if you took care of that mess, how many homeless would there really be? And then you can build for them. What do you think?
I think you're completely right.
Hey,
You know what I think? I think that
There you go.
if we can
so you take
figure
care of their addiction. It's about the drugs.
No, I understand, but there's got to be a way. Maybe AI will invent this pill that we can give either a shot or a pill, like Abilify, just something that just gets into the brain,
Like an instant blood transfusion to get rid of all the toxins.
and then,
make
but
them
no,
not
but they just
crave.
make them not go. I don't have addiction anymore.
Yeah, we actually do have medications like that. There's antabuse that makes it
Right, for alcohol.
impossible to drink.
Yeah, but antabuse is a torture. You take antabuse, you're going to puke. So that's kind of
No, I think
painful.
something that can.
If you
I
drink.
think, if you drink.
but something that
But you're still craving the drug. When you consume a lot of alcohol, you become a diabetic, right? Because alcohol turns into sugar. You start craving the sugar. So part of your addiction is to get that sugar need, isn't it?
No, it's
I should have kept it with that one.
no,
I had
that's
right.
Frank. No, the thing.
it's all alcohol. It's your body becomes physically dependent. What happens is, if you want to get into the clinical aspects
Yeah,
of this,
right.
when you start drinking, your body stops producing dopamine. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter that makes you feel good. It helps you think, and it makes you feel level and normal. When you take a lot of different drugs, not just alcohol, but like opiates and other drugs, your body says, "Oh, we don't need to make the neurotransmitter anymore because it's being supplied somehow from the outside." So the body's very it's efficient, so it doesn't make the dopamine. And then you take the drug away all of a sudden, and you have this massive shortage of dopamine, which you need to survive, and the body gets sick because it takes a while to gear that back up. So in the case of opiates, it takes about 7 to 10 days to get back to normal where your body's making these own.
Oh, that's not that long.
No.
Can't you keep it? Okay, so in the county, if you're suicidal, you got a CMH, if a mental patient, you go into a 72 holding at CMH, right? If you get picked up on the street.
You can, yeah.
And
usually,
why can't you
usually
keep
it's
them
not
for 10
CMH,
days?
usually it's one of the private hospitals, but okay.
And the only after 72 hours, you tell the person, do you feel like committing harm to yourself or others? And if the person says no, then they leave, right?
Yes.
And so if it only takes 9 to 12 days to detox someone, can't you keep them in there for a 9 to 10 day evaluation, not a 72, and then get them on the right program?
So there's a law called the LPS laws. Stands for Latimer and Petrus short. It's the laws that govern how you can keep people against their will. And those laws say that you are not allowed to keep people against their will based upon drug addiction or alcohol abuse. So a lot of people would come to me and say, please put my daughter on a 72-hour hold because she's a heroin addict and she's going to kill herself.
She's going to die.
She's going to die out there. And I say, you're right. She is going to die out there. She's, living with gang members in some rat-infested flop house.
Right.
And she's overdosing all the time. And she is going to die. But I'm not legally allowed to put her on a hold unless she tells me she's trying to kill herself. So if she says, yeah, I'm taking heroin because I want to die, I want it to kill me, I can put her on a hold. But if she's taking heroin because it's a lot of fun and she's hanging out with her friends and she feels good about it and she doesn't want to stop, I'm legally obligated to say, go at it, have a good time.
You ever seen some of these other countries?
That's a hard one because you got the freedom, I guess, to die. If freedom is like, leave me alone. As long as I don't admit it.
Yeah.
I'm gonna party. How do you not know where that life's gonna lead you? You got a shot in your arm. You're homeless. You're buying who knows what on the street. You know there's fentanyl out there being mixed, but you continue to do it. But you allow that person that needs the most help, laws that protect him from living. Why don't we change the laws?
Because we have
aren't we at a crisis?
Because we have a supermajority in the California state legislature that is not just Democrats. I don't really have a problem with Democrats. They're super radicals. And I don't know why, and I can't really answer. I don't know why California doesn't see what's happening. The state is obviously declining. Every part of life is not as good as it used to be.
It's unbelievable.
And you think that normal people would say, you know what, I'm not gonna vote for radicals anymore. I'm gonna vote for like middle of the road type
Moderate,
people,
right.
whether it's a Democrat or a Republican. There are moderate Democrats. They've just been pushed out.
The problem of being a Democrat or Republican gives the government, whoever's really in charge, the ability to separate and divide. And it's so easy for them right now that you're never going to get a consensus. Because if I want to be a politician, everyone loves my views. They don't know which party I'm at. The second I put a D by it, the Republicans are not going to vote for me. The second I put an R, the Democrats are not going to vote for me. So it's so party-driven that whoever's in the majority is going to win. Right now it's the Democrats. So it's going to be a one-party state, Democrats. And I think the Republicans have no chance, even a good Republican, to come up with a solution because the R is by his name.
I can also say every single city that I see that's in massive decline is run by a Democrat.
Right.
San Francisco.
So why is there such a
New
denial
York,
like your policies don't work?
Whether Los Angeles. I mean, Los Angeles, these guys are running in stores and just looting like crazy. And you know what? They may not even get arrested.
The same people
because it's under 950.
who carry guns, firearms, are being, there's all sorts of things like, I can't believe you carry a gun. The Second Amendment doesn't need that. Get rid of guns. But it's like, well, if you would have a lower crime rate, really low, where people don't feel like, oh my God, I literally have to carry a gun now, or I feel like I'm not being protected because I've seen on the social media windows getting smashed, carjacks, shootings, robberies. They're scared.
They're scared.
Cops don't respond. The cops only respond to take a report. The cops never break it up. The cops never catch the bad guy at first. I mean, it's rare. They're there for a report. I need to be protected. So how could you tell people not to carry their guns when other bad people have guns and are actually using them to kill.
You can't.
You see how it works? It's like if you give me, like they always say about the Democrats, the leaders, you may be against guns, but you got a team around you that's heavily armed. If I had a team around me that's heavily armed, I wouldn't carry.
Yeah, you know, that whole gun debate, we're really talking about everything.
No.
But
We're talking about
I find it really interesting that the same people that are very offended by the idea of law-abiding citizens having firearms are perfectly fine with having no bail and closing the prison system and defunding the police.
Right.
If you don't want the populace to protect themselves, you got to make it safe.
There you go.
And you know, if you make it lawless, of course people will have to protect themselves.
I mean, back in the day, no one thought about, when we were growing up, we didn't know anyone carried guns.
No.
Well, they didn't.
No, and if you got in a fight, you punch it
back
out,
in the
right?
day, we could ride our bicycles through the canyon to get to our friend's house.
Yeah, without feeling like you're going to get molested.
Yeah, or attacked. Now,
Can't
would
do
you,
that.
if you have a 10 or 11-year-old kid, would you let them ride their bike through the canyon?
Oh my gosh.
Be like,
No way.
that was just normal. The worst thing we were worried about is getting bit by a
There's-
snake.
Yeah, there's
I-
camp. Yeah.
I used to meet my friends at 5 o'clock in the morning, and we'd ride our bike across town to Lake Murray
Right.
Yeah.
and build a fire and go fishing by ourselves. And we were
Of course.
11 years old.
Yeah, we did that too.
And when the sun starts setting, you're like, I got to
Go
start
home.
getting home. It's getting
Yeah.
dark. I got to get
Right. No one hassled you. And it was on the military base, and the military didn't care. You can't do that now.
But I can, okay, so for a lot of people, growing up in the 60s, for a lot of people, it wasn't that good. Like if you were black, it was tough. Because like there was like,
well, in some neighborhoods,
and
it's still
you
tough.
didn't
I mean,
even,
it
if
hasn't went away.
you couldn't even live in La Jolla if you're a Jew. It was
right.
tough if you're a Jew. It's still tough if you're black or you're a Jew. It's way better, but it's still not good.
Right, exactly.
But to put in so many protections that the pendulum has just went way over, like too far, where your kid, I can't even leave my garage door open when I'm working around my own house, because I know if I do and I'm in my house for over an hour, I'm going to get shit taken out of my garage. This is guaranteed. I'm going to get ripped off. Some guy's going to drive by, open garage, I'm going to go in there. And you know, if
golf clubs or something, yeah.
of course, they're gone.
Power
Everything
tools.
I have so much shit in my garage. I leave it open on purpose to hope someone will steal some of my
Yeah,
stuff.
but just to get rid of all the crap you have. I know.
Let's go free without.
I always
airport
find it.
there.
No,
No, but that's like in the porch pirates. Here's another weird thing. Let's talk about everything. Why is it if I have an envelope this big in my mailbox and someone opens it and takes my envelope, that's a federal crime
You're right.
because it's against the U.S. Postal Service. But if I have a package that's delivered under it or by my front door from UPS,
A non-governmental
agency, it's you could take it all day long. There's no report. I got the guy on video. There he is. He's smiling at me. Here, cops, do something. They don't follow it.
Well,
Why can't we make the laws match?
I don't know. For my own personal bank account, I think Amazon should be outlawed.
exactly.
If you look at all the stuff around my house,
Yeah,
I
we
don't
got
know if you
that.
guys do. I come home, I look,
3 packages every
I'm
day.
like, what's in those boxes?
My wife has
there?
a truck dedicated to her. It's her
I know
truck. It just delivers for her.
They got my wife's picture.
Mark
at
drives
the
it.
at the corporate office. They got a
pick
big,
up my
a big
stuff.
picture
Exactly.
of my wife, and they say our founder. You know, Betty. I'm sorry, I didn't. I'm
okay.
just joking. It's
Yeah.
The biggest
No throwing our
problem that
wives
they
under the
did
bus.
was this Prop 47 in California, which essentially made it legal to
Commit crimes.
have drugs
Right.
and to steal anything under $950. It emboldened everybody to do all these things, and they can be arrested, but they're not going to get prosecuted.
well, they don't even get arrested. So in El Cajon, like every other place around, we can give you a ticket. So.
Please show up in court.
You know, and so you go to the guy and say, "Do you have any ID?" No.
No.
What's your name? John Smith. All right, Mr. Smith. Here's a ticket. You're supposed to show up in court. I say, "Yeah, thanks."
Right.
And the cop drives away. He puts the ticket in the trash can, or actually just throws it on the ground, and that's the end of it.
And it goes into another store and steals. Now they're trying to even push an ordinance that allows, if you are a citizen and you walk into, let's say, Vaughn's, and you start seeing these people throwing, and as a citizen you go, hey, stop doing that. don't do that, then you can be charged by housing a guy who's stealing. Have you heard this?
I haven't heard that, but I heard
You're going to hear it.
I heard
It's
it
coming out.
I heard an
So
interesting.
do not approach goes to citizens, because now if something happens, you're the aggressor, you're the perpetrator.
You've bothered their peace. So,
Your thing is to get a description, call 911, and give information, and don't get involved. I mean, I was just told this: a homeless guy came down my street and he was yelling and screaming.
Yeah.
My neighbors call me 10 houses
Right.
up and go, there's a guy coming down and he's going towards your house. I live on a cul-de-sac. So I get 911. I'm like, hey, do you have a PERT team, psychological emergency response team? Somebody's coming down my street screaming, throwing trash cans. He makes it to my house. I'm like, and she goes, don't approach him, don't approach him. I'm like, well, he's going to go in this neighbor's front door, so I'm approaching him because I'm not waiting. But all I did is I said, excuse me, would you like some water? Because you look thirsty. And he goes, sure. And I'm like, can you just sit down here? And, can you just sit down and chill out in my front yard, and I'm going to go get you some food and water because you look like you freaking need something to drink. Because he was, I saw an IV in his arm. He just got out of a hospital socks, no shirt.
Psychotic.
And so I just kept him there,
Scary.
but it still took like forever.
Was he calm?
Yeah, he was still screaming, but he thought his girlfriend was hiding in the cars. So he's screaming at my car.
Yeah.
And I didn't say your girlfriend's on it. I'm just going, hey, don't yell at her yet. Just.
Yeah, by the way, don't ever contradict people on their psychosis.
Don't ever what?
Right.
Don't
exactly.
you
Right.
don't
There's nobody there. I know.
Yeah.
If somebody's,
I said, don't yell at her now.
If somebody's saying that they're being monitored by a satellite,
Yeah. You say no problem.
you say, yeah, I understand.
Right.
If they say you're trying to kill me, you're having thoughts about killing
Right.
me, you say, no, you're wrong about that. I'm not having any thoughts to
Right.
kill you. But
No, I got you. That's why when he was yelling at the car, I didn't say, that's a car.
yeah, if you see that, you're acting crazy. That's
I just go, don't yell at her right
That
now.
doesn't
Let's
help
just
you,
get
though.
you some Gatorade.
Hey, you handled it really well.
Kelp
Well,
and
because
Pop.
he used to be a cop.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
You have law enforcement. You have different training. You have law enforcement training.
Yeah, the last thing that's going to solve a problem is guns, or you're not
Yeah.
going to try and take the guy down. I mean, what if he bites me, or bullet borne?
Well, if he's not posing a threat, did you see the guy who?
just screaming.
Did you see the guy who
However,
was
he's scared
robbing
him.
the 7-Eleven, who was burglarizing the 7-Eleven? He had a trash can,
They beat
and
him with a
they
stick.
beat him with a stick. I mean, even to me, I was like, that's a little excessive.
Yeah,
like,
a little
You're
excessive.
beating
But
the,
people are tired of it. How do you know that's not the 20th guy?
well,
that-
even if it was a 20th guy, you can't
I
beat
didn't see
somebody
that.
with
I
a
didn't
stick
see
like
that
that.
one.
You know,
What they
Like-
said was that he had been there 3 times that week and had completely emptied their shelves.
oh no,
And of
so
course,
he deserved a good ass kicking.
yeah, curbside.
I didn't see it. Was it gnarly? Crazy?
yeah, it was a little.
Yeah, it was
a little
like
over the
a
top.
little
like
excessive,
they were
excessive
yeah.
force.
Well, they were choking him.
Yeah.
And then the other dude was just whacking him with a stick, and he's like
It's hard to
saying,
control.
"Stop!" And he didn't seem crazy. He just seemed like a dude who wanted to steal stuff. But I wasn't there. I don't know what's going through these guys' mind. I don't know how much.
Well, what would you do if some guy came into your garage for the 3rd time in front of your family and started stealing your stuff, and you had a stick?
They'd probably hit him with a stick.
Get his ass kicked.
Yeah, well, but then you'd have to take the repercussions of like
And then you just do.
whatever.
I mean, if nothing happens to them, what's going to happen to you?
I shut my garage because that's how I prevent
Keep that
these.
garage.
That's how I
Right,
prevent
you
these things from
avoid-
happening.
Avoid gas stations after 10. There's a whole bunch of things you can do in life just to
But I'll
Yes.
tell you what.
not be in the wrong place.
When
at the
we
wrong
go
time.
back to this homeless problem, and
I want the solution.
But the thing is, their homeless people are, from the last statistics I saw from San Diego, 517% more likely to commit a crime, and then they're committing crimes on each other. And explain, they end up in the hospital. With traumatic injuries. I mean, they're like, some of them are really getting their ass
Well, it's like
kicked.
over 80% of violent crimes in San Diego are homeless against homeless.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have, and these are stabbings, shootings,
rapes.
chopping fingers off, they go into a trauma center, right?
Depending. yeah.
Transported. Let's say there's a butcher knife in the guy's head and he's still breathing, right?
Yeah,
So
that's definitely a
not-
trauma. That's definitely
not
a
ER. That's
major
definitely
trauma.
And so when you get that system, the 911 system involved, the trauma involved, the surgeons involved, the cost of the hospital because that guy's not going to pay. And typically, if you ever get a bill from a trauma center, it's going to be above 30 grand. Am I right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So a couple hundred G's later, and not only that, you can't let the guy leave. The hospital has to house him until he's done well, and then they have to find housing for him. So that impacts everybody, the whole society. And that's why we have these cost in medical when you get a Band-Aid for $500 from an ER room. How do you
Yeah,
handle that?
Tylenol is
Right?
$50.
Well, yeah, we certainly see that in the psychiatric world. The psychiatric hospitals are revolving doors for people that want to get off the streets. So they would come in and say, I'm suicidal. And they just got tired. They got tired of being on the streets. They want to take a rest for a while. They come in for
Food.
2 or 3 days, eat, sleep,
Shower.
take a couple showers, and then you say, okay, I feel better now. I want to go home. And I had people we called frequent flyers that I would admit 3-4 times a month. And you try to talk to them, tell them to get out, but they know the game. They say, you can't kick me out. And I say, yeah, you're right, I can't.
Right.
And and they say, yeah, you're gonna have to admit me. And here's a funny story. So there was a guy who came in, and I went into the room, and I was tired. I was done with it, and I said, what's up, man? I knew him. I said, what's going on? He goes, I need to be admitted. I said, John, you don't need to be admitted. He goes, I am. I'm going to kill myself. I'm suicidal. I said, okay, fine. I'm going to go do your paperwork. I'll be back a little bit. He goes, yeah, can you get me something to eat? I said, yeah, sure. So I grabbed a sandwich and a milk. And I took the sandwich and the milk to him. I remember he had just told me how suicidal he was. I gave him the sandwich and the milk. He looked at the milk and said, this is whole milk. I said, yeah. He said, do you know how bad this is for you? I goes, I can't drink this. I need 2%.
I want to live. Wait, I want to die. Right. Contradicting himself.
Hey, Bill, let me ask
That's
you a question
funny.
here about being the mayor.
Yes.
You're one of probably of only a handful of Republican mayors in the county, correct?
Yeah. A few.
And then, but the way you articulate yourself, and I've seen you multiple times. You were just on Fox National talking about various things. The way you articulate yourself, it makes a lot of sense. Do the other mayors that you work with ever call you and say, hey, I kind of like what you're doing. I want to partner with you, even if they're from a different party?
Yeah, we all. Oh, nobody ever from the other party.
Okay.
But I'm good friends with most of the other Republican mayors in town, and we collaborate on things. Along with like Jim Desmond and Joel Anderson. We'll collaborate on various issues.
But as far as like the mayor of San Diego or the mayor of another or Chula Vista,
I did meet with Todd.
because
And
I know him. He doesn't seem like he's that far radical. He's trying to get the homeless off the street. He passed some laws that weren't popular for the city. He said, okay, we're not going to have any more encampments. We're going to get rid of them. Like, it seems like he's doing little steps.
What's he doing wrong? Let's just put it that way.
Why can't he get this done?
Why can't Todd Gloria get it
Why
done?
can't all the mayors, regardless, everybody has the same problem. It doesn't matter what political affiliation they're in.
Yeah.
Why can't they just go, hey, we got to solve this one?
Well, first off, I will say that Todd Gloria is articulate and super smart. I sat next to him in San Diego for a long time. Very bright guy. I think he's been fairly radicalized by the left. I'll give you an example. He tried to pass a law in the legislature that affected me. It said that if you're a therapist and somebody comes to you and says that they they have same-sex attraction, but they don't want that, they want to be treated to help them not have same-sex attraction, that it would be against the law for a therapist to try to help them. So if you came to me and said,
Right. I'm attracted to guys.
I'm attracted to guys, but I don't want to ruin my marriage. I want this to go away.
Yeah.
I would be against it. According to Todd's bill, it would be against the law for me to try to help you. So I think that gives you a sense of how radical he is. But I think he's doing.
Did that law pass?
I believe it. It didn't make it. It came close, but it didn't make it. But that's I only give that to you for context. I think that he has started off his his candidacy being pretty far left. I mean, I think he opened up the streets to homelessness. I think he didn't really want to do anything about it. I think he, was in favor of firing all the employees for not getting their injections. Right. So I think he took some pretty far left positions. I will give him credit for his recent having seen the light on not letting people sleep on the streets, and he's going in the right direction with that, and I'll give him credit for that. And I don't think it goes far enough. It doesn't go as far as our camping ban in El Cajon goes, but he's leading the way, and a lot of people look to him for leadership in that area. And I'm hoping this will set a trend where all the other cities say we can do better than this. We don't have to live with people camping on our streets. I think that would be a great step. But he's also still a large proponent of the housing first model, which I completely disagree with.
I agree.
So housing first means that if you're going to put someone in housing and the person in charge of the housing says, we'll be happy to take you, but when you're here, we want you to be sober. We don't want you on drugs. We want to get you better. It's off the table for them, right?
Yeah. Well, they can't get government funding if they do that. They
can't get government funding. So if you want government funding, you got to take the heroin addict, let him shoot up, do whatever he wants. Just get him in a house because housing is first.
I mean, a perfect example of that is the housing vouchers in the city of El Cajon that are paid for by the county. They take the housing first model. They don't vet people based upon their drug addiction problems or even their criminality problems. They just say, if you need a place, we're going to put you up in El Cajon and pay for it. That by the way, they're paying, I think it was $4,500 per month per person.
It's a lot of money.
Yeah.
So 1 or 2 bedroom?
I believe it's a single.
That's a hotel room.
Single hotel room. So they're paying these hotels.
Who owns the hotels?
They're private owners.
They're just like, all right.
But
so you think they would?
A private owner used to get $70 a night for a crappy motel, and
$2,100 a month.
Now they're getting $150 a night, and they're getting every night guaranteed. But the problem is these people come and trash the place, and they commit all kinds of crimes. In El Cajon, we've had all kinds of problems with these housing voucher folks. They've a couple of sex offenders came and raped several of our high school students.
Jeez,
God. A teenage girl was shot in the head, and she's in a vegetative state in one of these hotel rooms. We've had all kinds of problems with people selling drugs and doing drugs and raping other people. And we just had a guy die of a fentanyl overdose in one of these hotel rooms. So it's a real problem.
In context, is the crime rate lower in a Motel 8 without the voucher people in there?
Well, I just tell you this. The unsuspecting person that comes and stays in one of those hotels, you might as well be staying in a prison.
Yeah.
You put your life in your hands. In fact, I will never go. At this point, I pay the extra money to stay in a nice hotel.
Right.
Because you never know if you're going to have one.
Oh, I gotcha. Right.
But if I ever had it, like when I go to Fort Bragg to visit a friend of mine, there are really no nice hotels there. And so I would ask the Motel 6, I would say, you have any housing voucher people in your hotel? Because I'm not going to stay there.
Right.
And it's not because I'm prejudiced against homeless people.
No, because you want to be safe.
Because I know what the crime rate is
right.
in one of these hotels. It's extremely high.
Didn't El Cajon have a disproportionate amount of these hotels?
Yeah, it seems like you guys
like
have
you guys
so
had
many
everybody. Like,
well, did you got the
well, let's hear
immigrants too?
No. I think it was
refugees.
It wasn't the refugees. I think it was the homeless vouchers. Like they crammed them all in El Cajon.
Yeah, they did. Look, I think they were punishing us. Do you remember that we had the encampment problem on Magnolia?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right on the border.
Yeah, so Magnolia goes from city to county, and up to the county line. There was, we don't allow any camping in the city of El Cajon, so there was no encampments up to the county line. And past the county line, it was like Bangladesh. I mean, we were having sex trafficking, rapes, open air. People were having sex in the middle of the street. They were pooping all over the businesses. I mean, it was insane. And so I went to the county and said, I want you guys to fix this. They just told me to pound sand. They said, we're the county. We don't care about this kind of thing. And so I said, you know what? Fine. I called all the TV stations out, and I said, this is the difference between a conservative-run city and a government that is liberal. And the difference is visual. You could see no homelessness up until the
Magnolia.
line, and then it was insanity.
Mayhem.
And that embarrassed them, and they eventually had to clean up that encampment. But immediately we started seeing more people on the streets, and we were like, where did they come from? And I sent the police to do an investigation, and they found out that they had all been just like dumped into El Cajon with this housing voucher program. So they would give these people vouchers through one of these NGOs I talked about earlier, and they would be able to stay in the hotel for over a month. And some of our hotels were 100% filled with homeless people. Some of them were 70 and 50% filled with homeless people. We looked into it, and even though El Cajon only represents 3% of the population of the county, we had 55% of the people that were in this housing voucher program were all in our hotels. So I got on TV again, and I said, well, why aren't these people in La Jolla and Del Mar and Carmel Mountain Ranch? And of course, complete silence. And I completely believe it's because I upset Nathan.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I embarrassed him, and I called him out. And he is a hardball player, and that's the way they deal with it. And, you know, I got to be honest. To this day, the county won't talk to us. We send them emails. We try to have meetings. We make phone calls, and it's not just me. They won't talk to our city manager. They won't talk to our planning staff. They won't talk to anybody. So that's no way to run a government. It's the high school way to run a government. But
that's sad. It's sad for the citizens. It's sad for the homeless.
Well, you know, when it comes to, I'm going to do an analogy to what's going on in your city. When you have an Airbnb, so it's a daily rental, there's certain rules that the city has imposed on these owners. That if you violate a noise ordinance or something, the owner of that gets fined. They also have it. Some type of a tag program. If your property has had too many noise complaints in a certain amount of time, the owner gets a permit. You get a $5,000 fine or whatever. So why doesn't El Cajon impose some type of a law that says to the owner of the hotel, if we have to send our police here, or if we have so many, we're going to start to fine you, and then fine them into not taking these vouchers anymore?
So we did that. And then we got a letter from Rob Bonta, the Attorney General of California, and he said he would basically sue us off the planet if we did anything like that.
Why?
He said we were violating people's civil rights by doing that. So we found an innovative way to do it.
Can't do anything.
We imposed a license that the NGOs, the non-governmental organizations, had to get to do their services in our city. And then we can take the license away if they don't control their residents. So if they get, if we have too many incidents where people are getting raped and murdered and that kind of thing, then we can bring them before the council, and the council has the option to take away their permit. So
when you're having all of this crime and all of this going on, it just makes it seem like it would be very reasonable to have these people incarcerated in some type of a facility, like you were talking about at the very beginning of the podcast, a hospital setting or whatever, to help them so that they can pick themselves up and live whatever life they can possibly live after being clean and sober. But
you can't do it in 30 days. So the problem is,
right.
Yeah.
That is the truth.
Right.
Yeah. So if you go to like the McDonald's Center, a normal person has a family who has insurance, who has money, who has backup, who has family, the support, they can maybe do it in 30 days. And
I don't even believe that.
Right. But they always fall back, right?
I've come to the conclusion that sobriety is about a year to a year and a half.
Right. So I was going to say about a year.
Of the intensive treatment. You could, if you're a functional alcoholic and you go to the McDonald's Center for 30 days, and then you go to a lot of meetings afterwards, and you stay in therapy, and then you got a shot. But for somebody who's like been living on the streets and just doing drugs constantly for 10, 15, 20 years, I think you need to go to a program that's like 2-3 years long.
Right. So that's the problem. And in order to get them in there, you're violating their rights. You're arresting them
It
without
seems
probable
like
cause.
everything that you've tried
Failed.
gets
Blocked.
it gets blocked by the government. It's like they're working against you. Everything you're trying to do is not just.
But there are ways to force people. You can't force people to treatment, but you can force people into discomfort. We don't have to make their life so easy.
Right.
We can. There could be stiff penalties for selling drugs and using drugs in the open. There can be stiff penalties for stealing or assaulting, stealing things or assaulting somebody. We can take away your money. If you come and you want social services, you want food stamps, you want public assistance, you want free cell phones, you want free medical care. You have to earn that by being a good citizen. If you misbehave, we should be able to take away those perks so that you become so uncomfortable. And people get upset with me for that. They say, "Oh my God, you're talking about starving people. You're making them." Yes.
Here's what I was thinking.
Because it would make them.
Right.
It
So
would
Yeah,
make
you
them
got to
hit-
motivate them.
I believe in hitting rock bottom. That is a tried and true concept in addiction treatment.
What about this? You get these people, they're easy to catch doing a crime because they're doing them in plain view. If you arrest that person and they steal, even if it's a misdemeanor, that's up to 1 year in jail, right? Felonies are 1 year in prison up to death penalty. But let's say you have a misdemeanor. Make it a misdemeanor to steal. Now they have a choice. You put them in court and you go, you have 1 year. You can go to jail for 1 year, or you can go into this building for 1 year. If you're in this building for 1 year jail, you'll go right back out and do the same shit. If we put you in this, we have a wraparound service that's going to help you be a better person. And guess what? In your situation, you don't have the choice. We're going to put you there. But most of the people, they get to make a choice. They did that in Vietnam when you get a prison sentence,
All the time.
10 in the pen or 4 in the Corps, which meant you could do 10 years in prison, or you can join the military and be in the Corps military for 4 years. And that's why they had all those people go into the Marine Corps, because they didn't want to go to prison. And
We
they
had some,
structured
not
it-
a lot, but there was a.
There's enough to where there's a documentary on it and books written about it, but there's enough people that once they were in the Corps, guess what happened?
They
Their life
straightened up.
straightened up because they're under strict guidelines with other people like them. So you take them and say, now that you're a prison, now that you've done 40 counts of whatever, auto theft, you're going to do time. You could do time here or you could do time there. And then that way they know, and if they screw up here, it's like probation or parole, then you go into the
Because I don't
hardcore
think
jail.
there's a there yet.
That's what I mean. So make the there.
There.
Just a suggestion.
Well, I mean, we already have something called drug court, and that's a court just for drug offenses. And I'm not even sure if it's still operating anymore. But back 15 years ago, a lot of people went to drug court, and they had the option of treatment or jail. And
there was less homeless people.
yeah, it's funny. I think this is an interesting point. A lot of people say, you can't change homelessness. It just it's an organic thing of having a city. So, well, wait a second. How did we not have homelessness in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s?
And other states today in America can
Yeah.
show you there's no homeless. Why is there no homeless there?
Yeah, I mean, I lived in California. I know you can live in California without homelessness.
I was born and raised here. There was none of this stuff going on.
It's just, goes back to the same thing we've been saying all along. It's just a matter of political will.
What is your next move politically? I heard you have a couple big moves coming.
Just one right now. I'm running for Congress in the 51st Congressional District. It's going really well. It's going to be a tough fight, but I think we can win.
What do you do in Congress? Let's say you get elected. Tell the people what you actually do as a job. Like what's a day in Congress? Because people don't know. They hear I'm a senator, I'm a legislator. They just go, I don't even know what they do.
Well, Congress's main job is appropriations, which is giving out money. And money is a very powerful tool because if you don't fund something, you can't do it.
Right.
So I think one of the things that you can do to help California in Congress is to say, hey, California, we're not going to send you transportation money or health and human services money or housing money or any of the other pots of trillions of dollars that we send you if you don't clean up your cities. We're just not going to send you any money until you clean your cities up. Do what you have to do. Do it your way. Do it with your own values, but fix it. I think Congress can be very effective in that case. But Congress is part of the legislative body. They work in conjunction with the Senate to make laws.
Right.
So any law that is proposed has to either start in the Senate or start in the Congress, the House, and then it is agreed upon in the House, voted on. It passes in the House, so then it goes to the Senate. They agree on it. Usually they say, well, we don't like this, and they send it back, and it goes back and forth until they come up with a law that works for everybody, and then they pass it. And that's the checks and balances that the Founding Fathers had. That's a lot of what Congress does. Right now, I think that as a congressperson, the big things that really concern me, I'm very concerned with the mental health crisis in America, which I think is all wrapped in with homelessness and the lack of treatment for psychiatric conditions and the lack of treatment options, the long-term beds. So I think that's a big issue for me. Another big issue for me is the border. Whether you think we should have more immigration or less immigration, I think any thinking person knows that you can't just have an open border where just anybody comes in.
Right.
And that's obviously what's happening. You mentioned the sex trafficking. It breaks my heart. I think Congress can do a lot. I think that we're going to have to deal with the cartels in Mexico. I think that there's a fairly good chance that means that there's going to have to be some kinetic involvement in that, meaning you're going to have to fight them at some level.
Boots on the ground.
Which means cooperation with the Mexican government or classifying them as a terrorist organization. However, that opens up a whole new can of worms, which you can go into. But I think the border is a big problem. I think the mental health crisis is a big problem. And I just think livability issues is what people care about. It's funny. My opponent talks mostly about abortion rights and transgender rights, which is kind of funny because in California, you couldn't have more abortion rights. It's
do what you want.
Completely free. I don't see anybody with a lack of rights with transgenderism. It seems like it's a protected class, if you ask me. But I don't think people care about that. I think people say, why is my electricity bill so high? Right. Well, why is a banana so expensive?
Food costs.
Why
everything?
Why can't I send my kids to school without being indoctrinated?
Right.
These are things that are bothering people, and that's I think that there's something you can do about that as a mayor. There's more you can do about it as a congressman.
And like you said, you're asking people, what are your needs and wants, and I'm going to help deliver for you. Like it's not like, and you're hearing it from the people.
Right.
We want the homeless off the streets. We want better mental health. We want our food costs to go down. I don't think anybody really wants an open border unless you're on the other side of the fence.
Well,
and
if you know how much damage comes from an open border, I happen to know because my wife's a trauma nurse, and there's a lot of people that jump over that fence every day, and they get broken hip bones. Pelvic fractures, femur bones. Children, women, they try to climb over and they wipe out. And I know as a fact because they end up showing up at her trauma because we have, if you make it over the fence and you're injured, you get to come to America and get treated by us. And so she sees the suffering of screaming people like every day. And people don't understand. It's not about whether or not a person can come over. It's like, hey, get a system in place, expedite it, do it quicker, but don't let them go through a desert and die. Don't let them go through water and drown. Don't let the babies die or the coyotes to rip them off right before they cross.
There's got to be a guest worker system.
There has to be a better way to do it.
There's got to be a better way to do this. It's not working.
We're a nation of immigrants. We understand. And everyone thinks, which I used to think it was many Hispanics were coming over. Okay, well, they deserve to have a good living, but it's everybody from the world.
But you talk about the women and children, and I have a soft spot for the women and children too. But let's be honest: most of the people crossing the border are military
18 to 25 single males.
That we have no idea why they're here.
Right.
And we have no idea what they've done, and we have no idea what they're up to.
Right.
You know, you combine that with the fact that we have 85,000 missing children who are showing up in sex rings and overnight factories.
They send them to the organ donors as well all over the world. That's where the money is.
Look, this is
Disgusting.
we can do so much better as a
right.
nation.
Right. It's so embarrassing. You see it happening because we're from San Diego, and you go like, are we just going to keep watching these people suffer? And they're, you know, you talk about slavery, and we're having a lot of racism still going on, or at least talked about it, and about slavery. But you go, hey, it's human trafficking is the grossest form of slavery, and we're just watching it.
There are more people enslaved right now than ever been in human history,
Right.
And we don't care about that because I don't know, because they're kids, or because I'm pretty jaded. I think a lot of the reason we don't care about it is because
It's not our kid.
because people make a lot of hay when there's a political advantage to doing so.
Right.
So
Right.
I'll scream racism when it's to my advantage, when I can push my own agenda forward if it's good to scream racism. But you know, when people are enslaved in the cobalt mines, what do I care?
Somewhere else.
You know, when people are being sent to their deaths and to organ donation in China as part of the Uyghurs,
Right.
you know, we're like, well, I'm still going to support LeBron James because he's my guy,
Right.
even though he's profiting off the deaths and mutilations of hundreds of thousands of people. I don't know, man.
I'm different than that. I wouldn't say LeBron James because what I think is, if you're going to go down that road, then the phone you're using right now is part of a child,
You're right.
in cobalt. So we're all guilty of it. If just because LeBron may stick out and you go like, look at this guy making millions, but we're all doing it.
Yeah, well, I think there's a
that's-
little bit of difference between LeBron and me in that respect.
Money wise,
Well, we make about
taller.
we make about the same amount of money. I mean, but he makes a little more.
you're a little bit more famous.
Yeah. No, but I mean, look, he is profiting. I'm not profiting from my cell phone.
Mm-hmm.
And if I had an alternative, I would take it. And,
Right.
you know, you bring up a good point. I have to think about how I'm going to get myself away from that. But he is actively shutting anybody down who wants to talk about the atrocities happening in China. And there's a special place in hell for people who are actively trying to protect persecutors of human beings. You know, if we all looked at people in the early 20th century who tried to apologize for Hitler and the Nazis, and, you know, we rightly said they're revile, horrible people. And I'm telling you that those kind of things are happening today. And, you know, all of us are being so disingenuous. We buy our Prius and we feel great about that, and you're not thinking about the cobalt mines in Nigeria. Right. And, you know, you buy your sneakers and you're not thinking about the slave labor that went to make them.
Or the soccer ball you're kicking, or a whole bunch of stuff, or the shirts you're wearing.
And I think, and I'm not going to be holier than thou.
Right.
We're all guilty of this to some degree,
Right.
a little or a lot, but we all should be taking a look at basic human rights.
If I was a country and I was looking at America, I go, you want to talk about atrocities? You just had 50 people shoot each other in one weekend in one neighborhood in Chicago. Like, that's not atrocities. You have multiple shootings in malls where people are killing kids, going in schools, assassinating. You have homeless. You have
They're going to
homeless
say
people.
the problem with that is guns.
Okay, what about the homeless issue where they don't have guns, but they're living on the streets and you guys are stepping over them as they're pooping in the streets, where the multimillionaire is living in the building that they're crapping on this. So everyone has atrocities. It's a matter of, like, I think people have to get together more,
So
figure out these
Well,
problems.
we hope that we get some good people.
It takes strong leaders.
It takes really strong
Right.
leaders.
That's
And
it.
so,
I'll tell you one quick story before we end.
Yeah.
I used to work in Hollywood. I was a musician up there, and
What'd you play?
I play piano, sax, and guitar. I still play. I still do
okay.
a lot.
Nice.
A lot of work.
So you had a fan club too when you were younger, right? You talk about my lifeguarding. What about the guy who plays the sax?
Oh,
He always
God.
killed it. It's like, no, not the sax player. Oh no,
he got all the
we're
girls.
done, right?
I got a joke about that. I didn't have a saxophone for a long time. And this is a true story. My wife bought me one about 5 years ago, and it was really expensive. Like, why'd you spend so much? And she said she was tired of living in a saxless marriage.
That was good.
No, so I worked at Ocean Way Recording Studio right on Sunset, and about 5 recording studios down was the studio that they did the "We Are the World" video.
Mm-hmm.
So I used to have to open up the studio really early in the morning, and I would always have to step over all the bums sleeping
In the hallways.
there. And I knew it was the same way at that other studio. So I'm on TV watching them singing "We Are the World."
Oh my God!
And I'm thinking they just stepped over all these homeless guys to go and sing this song about how wonderful they are. But the world is kind of a funny place sometimes.
It is a funny place. Well, we wish you good luck. We know that it's just so bizarre, the political atmosphere right now. We got Trump, I don't even watch the news anymore, by the way, but Trump's being indicted again for how many times. You got
I think it's his 4th time.
4th, and there's probably going to be more. Whatever. It's just so the world is weird right now. Everyone feels it. You can cut through it.
Mm-hmm.
No one's feeling secure right now. A lot of strange things are going on. So I wish you really well, because you have big shoes to fill, but you have to have thick skin for this, because you will be attacked character-wise. Yeah. It is coming. They don't hold back anymore. They used to call it mudslinging like 20 years ago, where you say a little bit of bad, but now they just go for your family, your friends, something you did in 8th grade. I mean, they're digging up stuff, and there's no ethics anymore involved. And I wish you well, because I don't know how you do it.
I wish you well, because you're just a good man. You really
and
are,
you're
and you're a
like,
good person. Like you're not, you're
You're
just, hey, I just want to help people. Like to the core, you're like, I just want to help people.
Right, he saw it live.
You may not have all the answers, and sometimes you may be off, but for the most part, from what I gather from knowing you for a while, you're on track, and you don't have like this ego. I think it's almost a pain in the ass for you to do this rather than a benefit. I mean,
you feel like it's a calling?
Yes.
That's what I'm saying. It's a
calling.
calling. It has to be.
You're not doing it for any other reason, because you're being destroyed.
The reason I'm running for Congress right now, honestly, is because I've come to the conclusion that the country is maybe an election cycle or 2 away from totalitarianism.
Yep.
And that if that's the case, if I really believe that, then I got to try to take this particular radical out. And I think everybody all over America who has there's a handful of people that have the name recognition and the resume and the ability to take out some really left-wing radical. I think they have an obligation to try at this point, because to me it's like the old movies where you're in the village, and it's surrounded by the wall, and the people are trying to break in the wall and get in, and you go to your room and you grab your sword, and your wife says, don't go and fight them, you're going to die. And it's like, what choice do I have?
Yeah.
They're
coming in.
They're knocking down the gates. We got to fight. It's not about my career anymore. It's not about my money. It's not about my relaxation or my plans to travel.
Right.
None of that matters.
Right.
My grandkids may grow up in a totalitarian environment.
And that's what I mean. That's what more
doing
and more
it for
people,
our kids.
More and more people are feeling that. They feel like, what do we need to burn the place down and start over? Do we need to have another war? Do we need to throw out? You saw it January 6th.
Well,
that was like the beginning. You never saw that before, but that's crazy.
We're going to find out,
because find out. Election is soon.
Right.
So in August 2023, for those listening right now, so we're not sure what's going to happen in the future, but good luck.
I will make a prediction right now.
Okay,
that this is going to be the most unusual election cycle we've ever seen. I don't know exactly what's going to happen, but I get the sense there's a palpable feeling of mine that people have had enough. People could take so much. And it's like, Popeye, I can't take no more.
Right.
And I think there's going to be a revolution. I don't think it's going to be a bloody gun revolution, but I think it's going to be a revolution of people saying enough.
Right.
If you're
too crazy.
If you're crazy, get out.
Right.
Like Jack Nicholson said, if you don't sell crazy here, we're all full.
Right.
And I think that's what's going to happen. Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much, Bill.
What a great time.
I
had a fantastic time.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for listening. Hit that subscribe
And thank you,
button.
Mark.
Yeah, and thank you, Mark, in the back. We have our crew in the back helping us with the cameras and doing all this stuff. And that was a good talk. I wish I could keep going, but we got to end sometime.
All right.
Thank you so much. Let's go.
Take care.
We're out.